All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Anti-Tech Cast. I'm Griffin, and today I'm joined by Jesse Dustin, the founder of Heartland Goats and heartlandgoats.com, and the author of the new book, The History of Nicholas and the Oracle of Knowledge. Hi, thanks for coming on, Jesse. How you doing?
Good. Super excited to chat with you guys. I love what you guys are doing and just keep plugging away.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Yeah. We love what you're doing. Getting the word out there about homesteading and how to do some of these things. You recently you sent us an article that you wrote about what is it called? Why and How I Quit Silicon Valley and Started a Goat Farm on homestead.org. A nice little inspirational tale, especially for people that are still living in the cities, still living in tech society, and are feeling a lot of these same things and maybe don't know how to go about getting out of the system. So I guess could you tell us a little? Obviously you're out on a goat farm now in the Sierra Mountains, right?
So I mean, I grew up during the when computers were coming out big. My first computer was an Apple IIgs, and then I had a Tandy Sensations. It was a Windows 3.1 computer, and I was just a young guy who fell in love with technology and such, and all through high school, I was like the computer nerd in the back room, working away on the computer. My senior project to high school, it was me and a Japanese foreign exchange student. We built some computers for our high school project, I used to love technology. I had big libertarian dreams for, the Wild West of information. After high school, I went to, I grew up in New England and Massachusetts, and I went to Institute of Technology in Boston there. And I graduated with a computer engineering degree. And I was like, I'm going to be a tech worker, I'm going to be an engineer the rest of my life. Right. And I really loved music. Music was kind of my thing. And so I worked for, my longest stint was almost 10 years at a company called Avid Technology. And they make Pro Tools and Media Composer and all the equipment that goes into making mass produced media. And I liked working there. I liked being an engineer, but it's like, I think that as engineers, we had like these big utopian ideas, wanted to, bring open source software to the masses and things like that. And over time, it's like the product owners get involved, the product managers get involved, the marketing people get involved. And it's just, we had good notions of how technology and music can be better. But just look around you today. I mean, I don't think many people would say that the music world's gotten much better. And my mentor at the time, a guy named Rob Silfast, who works at Apple now, he recruited me and a couple other guys to leave Avid Technology and go. We started a research and development office in Silicon Valley, and we were doing work for Gibson guitars and these big players in the music industry. And it was while I was working in Silicon Valley, I just kind of, it's just no place to live. It's no place to start a family. It's just, being stuck in some little dingy apartment that costs, $2,000 a month. It just didn't make sense. And at some point, there was another kid from Massachusetts. He had a website from insidethebox.com, and he was this kid that was working at Google, and he moved into a box truck in the work parking lot to try to save money. And I was like, dude, that's genius. I can get out of my apartment. I'm just going to go buy a camper and I'll live in the work parking lot. And that was kind of I had no plans to start a farm. I had no idea this stuff. I was just trying to save up some FU money to get the hell out of Silicon Valley. But it was kind of living in that camper and living a minimalist life in that camper. I realized that I didn't need much stuff to be happy. I realized that I didn't need all these bells and whistles, all this technology that surrounded me. Mm-hmm. And I found that I never wanted, now that I lived in a camper, I never wanted to be around the Bay Area. I never wanted to be around San Francisco. Any free time I had, I was off in a canyon, off in some mountain somewhere. And I just felt more at peace amongst nature. And it just made me sad that how much humans have disconnected themselves from that type of stuff. It's like, everyone thinks they need a TV or YouTube or whatever. Everybody thinks they need a smartphone. Mm-hmm. Everybody thinks that they need all these comforts to be happy. And I just found that I was much more happy with less stuff and in nature and away from all that technology. At some point I ditched my smartphone and I got a flip phone, and nice. And I just found I had more time to read and write, and I met my wife, and we have 2 sons now, and I guess I just kind of questioned all the stuff I was brought up believing in. And during this journey, it's like I could see little pieces of this. When I was in Massachusetts, I actually interviewed with Ray Kurzweil.
Oh, wow.
Because I was like, oh, Kurzweil, he makes keyboards and pianos. I love that. And then I go to interview and it's like, wait a minute. No. He doesn't make pianos anymore? It's like he's some kind of transhumanist, it's like, he's one of those guys that's pushing this kind of Huxley Brave New World. Mm-hmm. And then, I'm sure, as I started reading Uncle Ted Kaczynski there, and Ellul and Rene Guénon and all sorts of stuff. And even like some more modern writers like Chris Smage is a guy who wrote a book called Small Farm Future, maybe a year or 2 ago. And it's just a whole nother point of view. He's a British, I think, sociologist, and he's just saying the only way out of this mess is if everyone starts having small farms, And it just became more and more obvious to me. I read Pentti Linkola and all these guys, and I never had time to read this stuff when I was working in Silicon Valley. I never had time to think about the stuff. I was just too busy. I was, busy, working on projects, working on stuff to line people's pockets with, right. And it's just so, I think when I have this discussion with people, most people are nodding their head in agreement. Most people get this stuff. It's like, there's some percentage of the population that doesn't get it, probably never will. But, especially since COVID and whatnot, people totally understand what I'm saying. So it's just it's so obvious to everyone now that we're kind of becoming slaves to technology. We thought that the technology would help drive humanity, and it's the other way around. It's like the technology is enslaving us. The cheap, shiny baubles and trinkets from overseas. Everyone realizes this stuff. It's just, are you willing to step out of it? Right. Smartphones and technology, it's kind of fractured our culture. It's fractured our country. It's turned us all into these little, what pleasure are you partaking in today, sir? The jouissance, as the French or Zizek would call it. It's like we only know what pleasure we enjoy. That's like the nation in itself. It's just kind of sad. And I guess now it's like my goal is to be an example for other people to follow, that there's a way out of this, that you don't need to become a slave to the machine like we've become.
Yeah, it's not as required as it seems like it actually is. I know that like I agree with you. A lot of people seem, you know, a lot of people are nodding their heads. Everybody seems to be kind of aware of the issues that are at play, but there seems to be also be this like paralysis that's happening where even though people are aware of what the issues are, they still can't pull away. Most people still can't find a way to pull away. Maybe I don't know if it's like the social connections that they've made through technology, and so they feel that they have to keep it around in order to keep those connections. Is there like a core
Sure.
reason in your view that is like why many people are having trouble taking that first step, even though they see what the issues are? What do you think is keeping most people back?
I can just say for myself, if I had never embraced a minimalist lifestyle, if I had never moved in that camper, I think I would have remained a slave to that system. I think that people are in their comfort zone. You know, they like sitting in their lazy boy. They like watching their TV, and people are unwilling to change. They're unwilling to step out of that. You
Mhm.
know, I think that the consumer culture has done a great job of placating people, keeping them docile, keeping them entertained so they don't ask too many questions. And I think a lot of it is the politics keeps people entertained. A lot of people, you know, they're caught up into this politics stuff, and I
Oh
used
yeah.
to be as well, you know. And I think that it's like, I think people think that like, oh, the government is in control or something, and I think it's the technology and the media. It's like they drive the daily narrative, they drive the daily train wreck, and it keeps people entertained.
Mhm.
And that's it, you know. I'm not one of those like doomsdayer guys. I don't think there's going to
Right.
be some cataclysmic event. I think that it's just the death by a thousand cuts, just the drip 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 of just an erosion of humanity. You know, I watched your interview with West Northwest, and yeah, I mean, it's like the mind is under attack. um
Mhm.
you know, she was talking about how, you know, people are just staring at cameras now, and I appreciate that she used a phone call to
Yeah.
call in. And it's just, you know, like she said, you know, technology is replacing us with itself. um and yeah, there's a large percent of the population that is too far gone. I guess where maybe I disagree a little bit with West Northwest is I do think that each person can do something by themselves to make a difference.
Mhm.
You know, I think that as more people do something else and others see that example, um, you know, they'll start switching over to the other side. Another group of people I always bring up in these discussions is we're all torn up about politics and all these things going on in our world. I don't think the Amish give two crap about any of this stuff.
Right.
You know, they're off living their life, doing their thing. And I, you know, there's a lot of people in some more extreme circles, and they're like, oh, you can't go start a farm, you know, you'll be Ruby Ridged, you know. And it's like,
Mhm.
the Amish haven't been Ruby Ridge since the 1600s, people.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this idea that you know, there's a lot of doomers out there, and they basically, a lot of them are like, you can't do that. You can't go start a goat farm. That's impossible.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that we just need more examples of people doing this stuff. And there's, you know, there's plenty of people doing it. There's plenty of examples out there. We just need to showcase them and highlight them.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I like to think that that's what we're trying to do is highlight some of these cases and
Yeah.
get some of those examples out there more so people can see them. And you know, I definitely I agree with your sentiment that I feel like we've talked with a bunch of people that have this feeling, you know, they want to escape the system. They want to like start some kind of small form community. They want to have some kind of like maybe even to use like I don't know if this term is the best, but like some kind of commune or a farm, or so just kind of like smaller, close knit community. Try to get further towards that end of the spectrum. But a lot of people are, it seems, are kind of like discouraged from that. they hear stories of these other communes that try to get started and how they eventually, get shut down by the government or whatnot, or they find that they aren't able to detach themselves from the system as much as they want to. They still like have to, get some supplies every once in a while from town, and so they're not getting like the full the full separation that they're looking for. And so then they're kind of like left in a state of paralysis too. But I think that what you're doing, like even I don't know if those types of people would think that your path is as extreme as they want it to. I think it's still going in the right direction, and it's still yeah.
It's interesting because like you mentioned communes and stuff, and like my background, I was a technology libertarian guy. When I thought of kind of leaving that world, for me, it's like, oh, I'm gonna go Galt, man, and when I did it, that's when I started thinking about, I guess I started thinking about the Amish a lot, and I started thinking about how they really have created their own parallel society, and I don't want to gloss over that they have issues too.
Right.
I've talked to people in the Amish community, and the biggest roadblock to an Amish couple getting married and their happiness is that the Amish man finds technology, and it's actually porn is the biggest separating point in Amish marriages. And, you find this stuff out and it's like, yeah, so, I mean, technology is screwing them over too.
Yeah.
Technology, it's not just destroying our culture, it's destroying all the cultures.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we tend to focus on our own, and it's all of them. And it's just, it breaks my heart to hear this stuff and to find out that technology is creeping into that community as well. But, Silicon Valley and the technologists, they're leading the charge for a self-centered life, a life built around whimsical pleasures, whim worshiping, a life of jest. So you don't notice the real issues. And, everything is replaceable now. Smartphones, cars, the endless scrolling. I think that as a young libertarian, I thought that the internet would be the Wild West, and it was turned into Las Vegas. It was turned into Las Vegas, always online, in your pocket, used to enslave your mind. So it's just kind of, a wise man once said, like, don't always assume that what's labeled as progress and innovation is really that. Sometimes without realizing it, we're not going forward, we're actually going backwards. And people think that it's inevitable that things are improving. And that's an illusion in a lot of cases. You start reading this stuff, books from the 1800s, and you're like, they were grappling with these same issues, these exact same issues. And it almost, you get the feeling that the people that were on the other side, on our side, they lost. Mm-hmm. And, it's like other people said, the people's power process is gone. People are stuck in surrogate activities. Mm-hmm. And that's no world to raise children in. It's not a cohesive world for a family. And, that's just kind of how I came to this conclusion.
Yeah, no, it is sad. I know you've mentioned a couple times about how like you met your wife after you started living in the camper and kind of going along this path, right? I'm curious just because like, I think a lot about, my family is still very much living in the tech system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
mine too.
Yeah. And so like, I guess I wanted to ask like, what kind of struggles or difficulties did you face when you were trying to like follow this journey and this path of like exiting the tech system? Were there like some relationships that you had to abandon? Did it make it harder to communicate with some people that you didn't want to let go of? Or like what kind of issues do you think you faced there?
No, I haven't had any issues like that. I mean, the only ongoing issue is when you talk to people in that outside world, 90% of the time they want to tell you about something they watched on TV.
Yeah.
Hey, I haven't had a Netflix subscription or HBO Max for 5 years. I have no idea what you're talking about, you know? No, most people, when you explain this to them, they get it. They're just unwilling to disconnect from it.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like I was asked, someone asked me recently, well, did any of your Silicon Valley folks, did they give you a hard time? And it's interesting. I had to think about it, and my first reaction was no. When I told people what I was doing, they were like, "Right on, man, man, that's awesome." But then thinking about it some more, it's like I had some old college buddies come by my farm recently, and I was explaining this to some of them, and one of them, I mean, you could tell that he was so into the technology world, he just didn't even want to hear it. Didn't, you know, like, how, there's nothing wrong with watching porn all the time, man. I mean, what are you talking about? It's just like, and I'm just, you know, so there's a lot of people that are just followers. And until there's a critical mass of people that have disconnected, they're always going to be defending that kind of dystopian world they live in. And I think part of it is admitting that it's that the technology taking over our lives is wrong. It's too much for them to bear, because that would be admitting that a lot of what they've done in their life was a waste of time. And I think for some people it's a tough one to admit. And I'm more than willing to admit that I wasted a lot of my life, you know, watching stupid stuff, you know, doing unproductive things. And when I started like writing a lot and writing a book, people were like, how long did it take you to write that book? And I was like, oh, just a couple months. And they're like, how did you have the time to do that? And it's like, well, I don't have a smartphone. I don't, you know, what else am I going to do? I mean, you know, so, you know, it's just, yeah, there's naysayers out there, but I find they're few and far between that people, like I said earlier, especially since COVID, I think before COVID, this, you know, I almost think it's divine that I disconnected from society in 2018, because like before COVID, yeah, this kind of was a hard argument to make to some people. After COVID, most people get it, you know?
That's interesting. So I guess I wanted to ask you, because so you dropped out before COVID, so to speak. How did COVID affect you, or how was your experience with what went on? Was it like I'm sure it was drastically not as dramatic as what most people went through. But
until I left the farm, I had no clue what was going on out there. And still today, like I'll go places and I'm like, I just can't believe this is still happening. I'm surprised that people are still wearing masks and such. I just, it's like there was a meme going around during COVID. It was a picture of some Amish people, and it was like, "Hey, how's COVID affecting your community?" And the caption on the guy was like, "It isn't. We don't have a TV." And that's pretty much what it was like. You know, I would go out into the world, and people would tell me these updates, and I'm just like, "Wow, man! I can't believe people." Yeah, it's crazy. I can't believe people are still falling. I mean, you know, it's interesting too. It's like I get the feeling that, and I've always had this feeling that like Europe, it's like they're in a tougher spot in some case. It's like if you really want to meet some doomers out there, go talk to some Europeans. And But on the flip side, it seems like America is way more corporate.
Hmm.
And it's like, it seems like Americans are way more, hey, yeah, we got to get the 5th, 6th booster. And it seems like I feel like Europeans are starting to be like, wait a minute, like, what's going on? All these boosters can't be good for our immune system, So I don't know. It's like, I feel like different parts of the world are slightly more accelerationist than the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like almost in America, it's like, it's the corporations rule, it's,
Yeah.
there's not much more to it,
Right. It's not a democracy. It's a corporatocracy.
Totally. Yeah. And that's kind of, that was for me at least, being a former libertarian, that was kind of the last kind of eye-opening thing for me was just kind of just even in Ted's manifesto, how could conservatives embrace technology and not think that it would destroy any sort of traditional life that they wanted? It was, so it's just kind of, there's certain things that I think for different people are eye-opening, and that was one for me.
Yeah, I think it you said COVID has been eye-opening for a lot of people. It seems like, I don't know, right now it's getting a lot more intense. It looks like, at least in Michigan, we're going to be going into another lockdown. People all over the place are getting infected. It's crazy. Due to technology, it's allowed really dense populations and really high populations to live in areas so it transmits really quickly. And then you get all this misinformation being spread around because now everybody talks via Twitter and nothing is verified. And so like the truth gets lost and more people get infected because of that. And yeah, and then so it's like, who knows what's real anymore. And so we're just get lost, and then people just like kind of it's like a learned helplessness, that they kind of fall back into.
Yeah.
And
COVID was like, for I'm not an accelerationist. I'm probably what you'd call a decelerationist.
mm-hmm.
But COVID was the accelerationist's wet dream.
Yeah.
It pushed the world forward 5 to 10 years at least.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're only going to get more of them, more pandemics, whether they're of a disease variety or a technological variety or nuclear or some other type of thing. It seems like that's the kind of path that we're going down. I did have a question. You mentioned earlier when you're talking about the Amish, and you mentioned like Mennonites in your book, and I like that as an example. I haven't really, interestingly enough, I feel like I haven't heard people refer to the Amish very much when talking about these things, but they're totally like, they totally have built their own parallel society. They're living a non-tech life within a technical nation, and so it's like, it's crazy. And but you said how, like, how tech is kind of encroaching on them a little bit too. I wonder, is there any kind of like tech that's been encroaching on you since you've kind of started this farm and stuff? It's like some kind of technological dangers that you still have to be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, the downside of COVID is when I moved out here and I bought land, the land prices were fairly stable in rural areas. COVID seems like it's pushed. I mean, I think I'm stuck here because I would never be able to leave, because it seems like, and I saw it during COVID, properties near me that have gone undeveloped for hundreds of years were just started being bought up. People started paying the asking price. People stopped haggling. And it seems like that overinflated land price of California has now spread. The Californians are spreading to, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, Texas, Idaho. And it saddens me that it's becoming harder to do what I've done. I just, I remember looking at prices in Idaho years ago, and they're double, triple, quadruple what they were pre-COVID. So it's I joke with people now, maybe it's time to start looking south of the border at Mexico. Maybe maybe it's time to start looking at South America or something. And I actually talked to someone from Argentina recently, and he led me to believe that the land prices weren't that much lower. So,
Oh, wow.
So it seems like the COVID has accelerated the push for people to exit the cities.
Mm-hmm.
One possible good outcome would be, I don't know. I have no insight into this. Is there going to be some kind of renaissance in the cities? Is the city becoming not an attractive place?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I wouldn't put any bets on that personally. But yeah, I mean, what technology is interrupting my life? Nothing really, other than COVID made people go a little crazy and want to flee the city faster. And so, the Amish, another guy from Silicon Valley that will occasionally mention the Amish too is Curtis Yarvin. I don't know if you're aware of his work.
No.
He points out, and I find this too, that people have measured the happiness levels of different cultures. And they find that the Amish, and for whatever reason, billionaires, have similar happiness levels. So, once again, it's you look out there at these statistics and you see that there's reasons to think that the technology is making us less happy, less fulfilled, and there's a reason to think that. And I'm sure there's plenty of things that the Amish do that would shock us. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, the Amish get together as a group and they decide which technology to use. And you and I can't imagine letting my fellow man have that kind of control over myself. Mm-hmm. But can you imagine what kind of trust a culture has when there's no lawyers? I mean, we can just negotiate about something in good faith without getting the government involved, without getting lawyers involved. Mm-hmm. So, I just like pointing to the Amish as they're kind of one of my test points. Well, how do they handle the situation? And since I've kind of looked into it and talked with some of them, I'm blown away by how different groups of Anabaptists and Mennonites, they've separated from each other because they disagreed over which technology to adopt. There's a group of Anabaptists that live out in California, and they allowed them to drive vehicles. And that was a separating point with some of their other groups. And some of them have started using smartphones and technology and things like that. But the point is that they get together as a group and they decide which technology to use. That's something that's totally the opposite of our kind of libertarian, freedom loving, go consume what you want culture.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like it's really interesting. You say that, and I immediately think that, like, part of the reason that I think that is because the Amish culture is just smaller in size too. There's less people like meeting around it as a group and deciding on anything when you have a group of 300 versus a group of like 300,000 is, it's just like untenable at that point. And technology allows that groups of that size to exist. And then it tries to facilitate ways to get those people to interact. And then you lose all of this human interaction that's going on.
Yeah. On the flip side, because of technology, their birth rate is so high that some people project if they continue on their current path, that in, I don't know if it's 100 years or 200 years, their population will outgrow the rest of us. I don't know if I believe this stuff. I'm just telling you what's out there,
Yeah.
So, it's because, because the mortality rate of, their children is low now, technology. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it's the catch 22 of all of these things. Nobody wants children to die, but when we invent all of these things and all these medicines and have all these systems in place, it allows for the destruction of the natural world. And
yeah, and you read like Linkola or guys like this, and they are big into population control and things like that. And perhaps for good reason. I don't know that I've thought that through, to be honest. But yeah, I guess I'm more of the Uncle Ted theory that we just need to have the right people having children.
Yes. Exactly.
And so that's why I'm big into telling people to go start a farm and stuff like that. And I think that a lot of people think that it's impossible. And I would have thought it was impossible when I was younger. Growing up, I never thought like, oh, you're going to be a goat farmer someday. But there's a whole other aspect of farming and goat farming that I want to get into. It's that when we talk about food, people are so disconnected from what it takes to provide them the food they're eating.
Right.
I think last I looked it up, even the USDA says that I think 40% of all food is thrown in the garbage. And that is so sad to think that there are animals that are living their life and being butchered so that people can throw away their food.
Yeah.
And it's just another reason why I love goats, because Americans never really got into goats. Goats have never been a main staple. But for these other cultures, and for our culture hundreds of years ago, it was you honored your food. You had a respect for the animals. You used every piece of the animal. You didn't just throw away half the animal and move on with your life. And so I didn't think this was going to happen when I started a goat farm. I didn't think that it would dawn on me that even our food system is so corrupted. I can, if you ever come by my farm, I can bring you to some cattle farms down the street. And I mean, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of cattle in these little pens, fed growth hormones, antibiotics. And I feel like if people in the cities knew the cost to keep them well fed, I know plenty of people that live in the cities, and they're like, well, I got rid of my car, Jesse. I take public transportation. I'm doing everything I can do. Living in the city is good for the environment. If they knew cost on rural places so that they could throw away 40% of the food.
Yeah.
The last stat I saw, it was like people are spending 40 years of their life watching a screen, staring at a screen. If people knew the cost of all this stuff so they can, stare at a screen all day and eat food, I think they'd be horrified. I think they would. And I would love to give some people these tours. I would love to show them, the cost that it's bearing upon our world, just so they can be ignorant. And I remember talking to a young girl recently, a young girl whose parents are from Mexico, and she was like, "Yeah, I was horrified when my father, killed the goat in front of me." And I just said to her, imagine how horrific if you had no clue the sacrifice that you've been eating meat your whole life and you've not once seen that sacrifice, So that's a whole nother topic that's opened my eyes more recently is the food situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask you about that because, I know, you raise goat meat and you sell it on your website. And it's all, it's from what I can tell, all raised very wholesomely. And that's great. And I love that. I know, like I myself, I've definitely seen industrial farming practices as one of the primary components of the tech system that's destroying the planet. And that's hidden away from the public eye so that everyone just keeps feeding it. And so as a result, I became vegan a few years ago. And so I've been vegan for a while, not eating, trying to lessen the support for those kinds of industries and stuff. But at the same time, I'm not like, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with eating meat. It's the fact that there are all these horrible practices going on that are both harmful to sentient beings in extremely sadistic ways and destroying the planet as the consequence. And so I don't know. I guess I wondered, did you have any thoughts about food when you were still living in the city that maybe changed when you started farming goats? I don't like. Did you have any kind of prior experience with farming practices and how you wanted to do it correctly or something like that?
No, I had zero, I mean, a lot of people think like you have to have some background in this stuff to get into it. I had zero. I mean, my parents grew up in the 60s and they tried to flee the city. Mm-hmm. And for me and my brother, they tried to raise us on a small farm and it just never worked out for them. They had to get real jobs back in the city. And I guess I never, when I was living in the city, I never thought about any of this stuff. It wasn't until I started farming and I started seeing how other people are doing it. Mm-hmm. And I started seeing how there's tons of small farms out there. They're doing it right. But there's some people, and I don't know if it's low self-esteem or it's just some people, the drive for more and more and more and more. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I know one farmer out here, when I first met him, he had half as many cattle as he has now. And he's making the same amount of money as he was making when he had half as many cattle. It's like our society is telling farmers that you must produce more and more and more to make the same amount of money as you used to. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I just want to sit them down and say to them, listen, you're a farmer, you're a hard worker. I understand that you want to produce more and more and more. The people you're producing for, they hate you. Yeah. You're enabling them to live, a comfortable life in the city, and you're sacrificing your life. I mean, some of the people, I mean, you've got guys working on at these big industrial feedlots, 10, 11, 12-hour days, 6 days a week. I don't know many Americans that would work under these conditions. Yeah. And there aren't many Americans working under these conditions. For the most part, these industrial farms, they're run by immigrants. And I think that if more people knew this, that they would question what it seems like the appetite. I mean, you're a vegan, mm-hmm. but it seems like the appetite for meat, it just keeps going up. We as a country make more meat with less animals today than we did 20 years ago. So like there's less cattle in America today than there were 20 years ago, yet we produce more meat. How do we do that? Hormones, antibiotics, packing them in, feeding them corn, feeding them, a high protein, a high energy diet. There's all these drugs on the market, Optaflex, Silmax, these drugs that it like makes their muscles bigger. Mm-hmm. it's just another reason why I love goats, because goats are like deer. It would be very hard to confine them and feed them. It would be very difficult to industrialize goats.
Interesting.
I think that sheep to some extent are kind of in the middle. Sheep are kind of like docile, like cattle. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. The whole food situation. I think that maybe it's something that people need to talk about more. I know that plenty of environmentalists are talking about it, and the book that I mentioned earlier, Small Farm Future by Chris Mage, that was another good resource on this topic. There's another group in Britain, I think they're called Cabrito goats, and they rescue dairy kids and raise those as meat goats. And so there's people out there doing better things. But at the end of the day, the world's desire for beef and other products is it can't be satisfied. It just keeps going up.
Yeah. Whether it's our appetites or just that the population's going up. And even though it seems like, I don't know, at least in some areas, California, I'm sure, Michigan's doing pretty well now as far as like offering vegan options and trying to offer alternatives to meat and things like that. And some people have taken it up, but on the whole, yeah, it's still a huge issue.
My biggest advice, and most people probably think I'm crazy, is moving into that camper. Really, for me at least, it made me a different person. It really did. I was so coddled. I was coddling myself, living in an apartment, watching TV, doing whatever. And moving into the camper took me out of my comfort zone. And it was another one of those things, when I did it, I was like, was this the right move, man? I can hardly sleep at night. It's like with all the traffic going by. And that's another reason I found myself driving out to nature. And for me, at least, that was the biggest thing I can say that I ever did that changed my mindset. That it forced me to embrace a minimalist life. And if you're not a minimalist, farming ain't going to work out for you, unless you want to become an industrial dystopian farmer or something.
I wanted to ask you, I just before, I know we don't have too much longer, but I just wanted to ask you, just to ask you a little bit about your book. So you recently wrote a novel called "The History of," The History of Nicholas and the Oracle of Knowledge. There it is. I got a physical copy right there. Can you tell us a little bit about, what it's about and why you decided to write it?
Yeah, when I started a goat farm, my other goal was to read a lot more, because it just wasn't something I had time to do. And since I left Silicon Valley, I've read more books than I read my entire life. And when you start reading books, you start thinking to yourself, I got some ideas in my head that I want to get out there. And I think, after reading Ted and Elul and Ganon and stuff like that, it's like, I was like, oh, I'm going to write this super intellectual book. It's going to be, and it was actually talking to my parents. My father was like, nobody's going to want to read your manifesto, dude. I mean, he's like, if you want to impact people, fiction's the way to do it. And thinking about what he said, I was like, he's right. I mean, there's so many fictional books that I can remember that are like, yeah, they had way more impact than reading someone's dissertation.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about what kind of book I wanted to write. And we had just had our second son, July of last year. And I also, people are often saying, well, Jesse, this all worked out for you, but what about your children? What kind of story are you going to tell them? How are you going to how are you going to explain to them? Because they're going to want to use this stuff. They're going to want to use smartphones. They're going to want to go on the internet. They're going to want to do stuff like that, like you did when you were a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of my thought process was, I want to write a book that explains to them why I did this, why I went down this road, why I gave up a career in computers to go start a goat farm. And so that's what I did. I wrote a book that kind of it parallels my journey. It parallels, a journey of a guy named Nicholas who falls in love with technology and gets a job working for these technology companies, but kind of sees, there's little pieces of society along the way that, oh, that's interesting. Why is it going down like that? And Nicholas moves to the forest and meets a woman, and they start a family. And then it's how does he explain to his children why he left that world? And one of his children ends up getting sucked back into that technological world, and it goes through his kind of trials and travails with escaping from that world. And so, yeah, I just I was reading a lot and writing. I was writing a lot. I write some blogs for the Unists. They have a little website, and I write some blogs there. And homestead.org picked up one of my articles, and I was just writing a lot. And I tell people, because I'll meet other people that are like, man, I want to write a book too. It's like I started writing a lot, and I wrote two rough stories, and then I kind of scrapped them. Mm-hmm. And I kind of sat down and I wrote this book in like a short time. And I was just like, that was the story I wanted to tell. And then over a couple months, I worked on it and updated it. And actually the guy who runs the Unism YouTube channel proofread it. And it was just kind of, a passion of mine to write about exactly what we're talking about, about the struggles of technology and how it's used to control society, how the marketing people, how they'll use all the tricks, the, urgency, you must buy now, I
like that little part you had. I just saw that last night. Yeah,
it's like, oh, look at all the likes, oh, we got this guy, he's a professor speaking from authority. And I actually I don't know that I've ever told this story. When I started, what got me onto that specific topic of the marketing tricks that people use to kind of prey on humans' own frailty and human nature, how they kind of use our own human nature against us to sell us things. It was during COVID. I decided to start my website, heartlandgoats.com, because up until then we had just been selling goats to people, face to face or at the auction. And when I looked into, well, how do I promote my website? I had an old friend. His name's Paul, and he's a pretty big trombone player. And he had this whole. He basically he runs a lot of Facebook ads, and he was explaining to me all the tricks that go into sucking people in and and making them buy your stuff.
And all that, yeah.
And being an engineer, I was an engineer. I just made technology stuff. I had no idea what the marketing department was doing to foist this upon people. He opened my eyes to the tricks. And so that, I had to throw that in the book. It just seemed like, it seems like the corporatists, the capitalists, they will use every trick in the book to make humans think that they really need, whatever they're selling. And it's sick. It's like, I guess that I thought that being like a young libertarian guy, I thought that humans were a bit more educated and a bit more noble.
Mm-hmm.
But seeing some of the tricks that people are using to run ads and things like that, it literally is like a casino. It's exactly how a casino tricks people into walking up to that slot machine and unloading their money, and it's this desire for people to it's a desire for people to get their neighbor to gape at them, to look at my stuff, look at my look at all this stuff I've acquired. It's the kind of the concept in some circles is like the life of the second hander, and yeah, I mean, it's just all this stuff. It's like, I wrote this book as kind of a summary, as to how I got here, and yeah, I hope people read it, and I've been promoting it everywhere I can, and people have been buying it, and everyone who's read it has really enjoyed it. So I started working on a sequel recently, and I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm just going to keep, my plan is to keep writing, a book every year or something until I die. And, if people eventually, hopefully get this message.
That's great. That's awesome. And yeah, I definitely can't recommend the book enough. It's a great heartfelt tale, but also kind of like a modernized 1984, just in the way you describe this Valley of the Silicons. The terminology you used is very clever too. I'm loving it.
I really think that, more people, since I've written this book, a couple of people have contacted me that, oh yeah, I got the ideas, and I encourage people to run with them. I mean, it's like, embody and live the life that you dream of, because people are going to see that, and people are going to want to emulate that. And it's like, I think often people think that nobody's doing this, and so I can't do it. And people need to break out of that mold. People need to step up and be leaders,
Yeah. Well, I definitely encourage people to read your book as in a slow manner, as a piece of philosophy. I really do think that you're expressing some ideas that are worth sitting and mulling over and contemplating and trying to draw into your own life. But yeah, for those that aren't aware, I'll post the links in the description. But Jesse's offering the first 8 chapters for free. Just shoot him an email, and you can grab that, and or you can also purchase the book. And if you can purchase a physical copy for 50% off with the code ATC. And thanks again for throwing that on there, helping out.
Yeah, and we haven't launched. I've just been self-publishing and self-releasing it. We haven't launched it on Amazon or any of these book services. So, I mean, maybe someday I'll go down that dark road of the Kindle platform. But right now, we're just selling it ourselves, and we've got a digital copy and a physical copy, and I've gotten a couple comments from people that are like, "Man, I'm glad you're selling a digital EPUB, copy. I don't have to go to, Amazon and get one." And so I hope people appreciate that as well.
Yeah, I think they do. I think we need to hop off of Jeff Bezos's train for a minute for sure. But yeah. Anyway, I'll I don't want to keep you from your family and the goats for too long. Thanks again for coming on and talking with me for a while. Is there anything, any last words of advice or any message you want to send to the public before we sign off?
No, I mean, I appreciate the Anti-Tech Collective and what you guys are doing, and I applaud it. I love Chad Haig and David Skrubina and all, West Northwest gave a great interview with you guys recently. And I love your website, what you guys are doing. Just keep pushing ahead, Griffin, and just keep doing what you're doing, because, myself and guys like you were an important part of the step for people to get the hell out of the dystopia that Silicon Valley wants for the world.
Yeah, totally. Thank you very much for the support. And we hope we want to support you as well. And hopefully we can talk to you again one day. Maybe we'll talk some more about your book another time. if
Anytime,
you'd be
man.
down for that. Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks again, Jesse, and we'll catch you later, I guess.